Hello, I'm Dr. Abdulal, and this is the third section of the unit on nature of sound. It's also the last segment of that unit. Okay, so here we're going to speak about resonance. Before, we spoke about fundamental frequency. We spoke about how things vibrate, mostly physical objects like a vocal folds or like a guitar string. Now we are going to move to another concept. So in the first two parts, we spoke mostly, to make you understand in different ways how the vocal folds themselves vibrate and how different sound waves work. So now we're going to speak about the concept of resonance. If you think, you remember that people will say to you, or you might have said it yourself to someone, when you are impressed by something or they say something that you agree with, you can say, yeah, I can resonate with that. So the concept of resonance has to do with two things. First, say you have one tuning fork, and then you have another tuning fork. So you hit, say this tuning fork is 100 hertz. This one is 100 hertz. You hit this one, but you do not hit this one, and bring them close together like this. And then you will notice that the second one that you did not hit kind of sympathized with the first one. It starts to vibrate, and it vibrates exactly the same number of vibrations like the other one. So we call this the applied frequency or the driving frequency, and we call this the resonant frequency, the frequency that results as that's the effect, or that results as the effect of this one. So then we move on to resonance, or to how the air in a particular chamber resonates or vibrates in response to some kind of applied frequency. Like if you have a guitar string, you have the string itself, you pluck it, that is an applied frequency. And then there's a box, a wooden box, that has air in it, and the air is shaped based on the configuration of the box. So then when you pluck the string itself is going to vibrate. Let's say it makes one tone. Then inside of the air inside of the box is going to kind of vibrate in response. It will be forced to vibrate in response to that guitar string. So it will kind of, you could say, mirror it, or it is going to give us a harmonic. It will vibrate itself. So we call this acoustic resonance. So let's begin and go into the details. So resonance is the tendency of a system to vibrate with the greatest amplitude in response to a frequency that matches or comes close to its own natural resonant frequency. So we have to look at this and break it down. So again, we go back to, here's this 100 tuning fork, this 100 hertz tuning fork. And when they are even, close means not like just close in distance like this. No, it's close in the numbers. Like this is 100 hertz, 100 vibrations. This is 100 vibrations. So because they are exactly identical in the number of vibrations they make, that will give me the greatest amplification possible, the greatest amplitude possible. The only other way that you are going to get a louder sound is if you get a third or a fourth, if you get other tuning forks that are exactly the same, and you hit one and put this one in proximity to all of them are gonna buzz, and you are gonna get a greater sound as a result of all. But if you are speaking only about two things, when they are identical in frequency, you are gonna get the greatest amplitude. So, but what if this is 90 hertz and this is 100 hertz? They are close. They are close enough. So as a result, this one is going to vibrate in response, to resonate. So we call this the resonator, and we call it the mechanical resonator. I'll explain more. But it is not going to give me 100%. It will not give me the greatest amplitude, the greatest loudness. It will come close. But what if this is 50 hertz and this is 100 hertz, and I put them close? They are related. So there's a possibility this is going to vibrate, resonate, but the resonance is going to be much lower because they are not close enough in frequency. This is 100 and this is 50. So this is what we mean by when it resonates. The greatest amplitude, when the frequency matches the applied frequency, or when it comes closer to it. So what is natural frequency or natural resonant frequency? Sometimes we call it RF. It is the natural way that something is going to respond by nature without any modifications in it. Like say this tuning fork. It is designed. It says 100 hertz on it. When you hit it, that's the natural way it is going to give you that frequency. If you have a container and you kind of apply a frequency, like say if you have a tuning fork and hit it and put it there, the air inside is going to vibrate. But if the way that the container is made, if it is by nature, if it resonates at 100, if its resonant frequency is 100, it will match this one, and you will feel the loudness, you will hear the loudness from this container. But if this is say 500, this is 100, the response will not be noticeable. So everything by nature has a resonant frequency. It will resonate based on its shape and its configuration by nature. And if you get something else that vibrates and apply a tone from this thing to the resonator, that resonator is going to respond. You'll have a sound from it. That sound will be the loudest if they match in frequency, or if this applied frequency comes close to the natural frequency of the resonator. So again, the natural frequency is the frequency at which an object vibrates freely. Natural frequency is determined by three things. We mentioned that before, by length, how long, and longer things vibrate more slowly, that is low frequency, and shorter things give you more. Like a small room, it's going to have a higher frequency by nature. It's going to have higher resonant frequency by nature. A large room is going to give you a lower resonant frequency by nature. And I'm speaking about the room because the room is a container that has air, the same way like a jar like this has air inside of it. So the room itself becomes a resonator. Density here, we know that massive things that are dense are going to produce to have a lower resonant frequency. And then tension or stiffness, things that are more tense, they will give you a higher resonant frequency. Things that are low, have less tension, they will give you greater, lower resonant frequency. There's a video here that speaks about or shows an old commercial by a company called Ricola. They make lozenges and medicinal things for the larynx. So if you watch, the whole thing is about a tube, a big tube, like longer, very, very long. And the guy stands on a mountain and just blows it and makes a sound and he says, Ricola. And then it shows you that they're using this long tube so that they can give you a lower frequency. Okay, so let's break down these concepts and look again at them. You'll find that some of these things are a repetition of what I just said, but that will reinforce your understanding of these concepts. So again, let's go back to this tuning fork and another tuning fork. Let's say I hit this one, and then this one has the effect. So forced vibration is the vibration of one object in response to the vibration of another. So which one of these is going to exhibit forced vibration? That will be this one, because I did not hit it, but I applied the force on this, and when I hit this tuning fork, and when I put them together, this tuning fork will force this one to vibrate in response. So this one is what produces the forced vibration. So for the vibration to occur, again, the natural resonant frequency, the NF, of both objects, they have to match in order to produce the greatest amplitude, or to come close enough. But there will be a point where if the difference is so great, you will not get a response from you are not going to get forced vibration from the object if the pitches are so widely different. So what happens when you have videos, for example, if you watch, you will see shattering glass with sound. There's one, if you Google Mythbusters, shattering glass with sound. It's an interesting video, and it shows you the guy holding the wine glass and saying, ooh, and he raises, as he continues to raise his pitch, the frequency becomes higher and higher, and it goes to 550 something, 56 or 54 hertz. And then all of a sudden the glass just shatters. So what is happening here is that the air in the glass vibrates based on the natural resonant frequency of the glass itself. Let's say, for example, let's say it is maybe 550 hertz. Then if you vibrate your applied frequency of the sound that the guy makes, he goes, ooh, if that is 550 hertz, and this is 550 hertz, the glass will not shatter because the walls of the glass are going to contract and expand to make waves back and forth based on the vibrations that this man made, and that is gonna make a significant amplification here. But this is not about the amplification. I'm telling you about the waves that are made. So when you say if that was 550, this is 550, as you keep, and you keep going higher and higher, and you apply exactly 550, 550, the glass is not going to shatter because the walls are going to go back and forth to in the same manner as the sound waves, and that would not break. But once you raise it more, 556 maybe or something, that is gonna not make the walls of the glass will not have a chance to go back and forth at the same time. They will be forced to go faster, and they cannot go faster because that is the maximum that they can go by. So that is gonna force them to just vibrate at a greater speed, and as a result, that goes beyond the limit that the glass can make, and it shatters the glass. So the reason it shatters is that the pitch that was produced was now greater than the pitch that the glass actually could vibrate. So again, if you have a number of tuning forks here, or any kind of, like, say, metal bars or something, and you have two identical ones, one here, and the other ones are different. So you hit one, you are going to see that the one that is close to it, exactly matching it, that will produce the greatest vibration. And the next one is going to give you a little bit. The more different they are, the less that you get a forced vibration. So again, the fork that I hit, the fork that I do not hit. This one, when I hit it and let it vibrate, then I bring it close to the other one. This becomes the applied frequency, or the driving frequency, the frequency that is going to force this one to vibrate. The resonator is the one that is like saying, yeah, you have the idea, I can resonate with your idea. It is not my original idea, so I echo what you are saying. So a resonator is the object that vibrates in response to an applied or to a driving frequency. And this resonator can be two kinds. You need to take notes of that. Excuse me. So the first one is mechanical resonator. Mechanical is something that physically that you could see making physical movement, like the tines of the tuning fork. They keep going back and forth physically, mechanically. But then the air, we don't see air vibrating, but it does vibrate. So we call the air vibration resonance. We call it acoustic resonance, or the acoustic resonator. The acoustic resonator is exclusively refers to a column of air in a container, and that air resonates in response to an applied frequency, like a guitar box. So the air inside of the guitar box is shaped in a certain way, so that when you pluck the string, that string gives the applied frequency or the driving frequency. The air inside of the box is going to be the resonator. Okay, what we are trying to come to here is to try later to explain how the throat, how the vocal tract is a tube, just like a column of air in a guitar. So that when the vocal folds vibrate, like the strings of the guitar, the vibration forces the air in the vocal tract to vibrate in response to the applied frequency, to the fundamental frequency of the vocal folds. That is what we are trying to come to, but we are taking this as breaking down the concepts one by one to bring you to that point. So resonant frequency is the frequency at which A resonator vibrates in response to the driving frequency, and we will be focusing exclusively in this part on the vocal tract. So we will be speaking exclusively not about mechanical resonators, but we'll speak about acoustic resonators, and particularly we are going to focus on resonance of the vocal tract, the pharynx, oral cavity, nasal cavity. So you need to understand these concepts, and you need to really memorize them, the definitions and the concepts. So acoustic resonance is the vibration of an air-filled container in response to an applied frequency. And I mentioned that the vocal folds will act as the applied to produce the applied frequency. That is the frequency that will force the air inside of the entire vocal tract to vibrate. And as a result, that vibration then exits our lips, and it is the vibration that you hear as speech. So the closer the container's resonant frequency to the driving force, the greater the amplitude. So we'll go back to the idea of the air in a container. If my vocal folds, say, or the resonance coming out of my mouth matches the resonance of the tube, that the column of air inside of this tube or container, then you are going to have an amplification. If it matches, the amplification will be 100%. If it comes close, it will be, there will be a response, but it will decrease as the difference between them in numbers increases. So now we have two kinds of containers that we'll focus on. We'll focus on first the way that a container is shaped, if it is circular, if it is rectangular, whatever shape the container is, that is going to change the configuration, and the shape will affect the resonance of the container. It isn't just the amount of air. So a tube, like all tubes, are resonators because they contain a column of air. So a tube that is opened on both ends is going to respond in a unique way, whereby half of the wave, only the first time that you put a wave into a container that is opened on both ends, only half of the wave is going to fit in. So in that manner, at the opening of the tube, you are going to have something called node. It is the area of rest, where you know how the sound wave goes like compression and then rest and then rarefaction and then rest. The rest point where the molecules are going to reach here, that is called node. And the node has constant a constant kind of vibration. There is no, a point of rest. There is no pressure, but it remains constant all the time. And then inside, you are gonna have the peak of the compression inside of mostly the center of the tube. So that would be half of the wave. So, but this is not gonna stop there. The same wave that as half of it enters here, the second time the tube is going to, the air will vibrate again to give you more harmonics. The second harmonic, or the second time it vibrates, is gonna give you, instead of, say, let's give you a concrete example, like the one that we did with the guitar string when we explained the harmonics. So if the applied frequency is 100 hertz, and so the wave goes in, half of it will fit at one time. The first time, half will fit. And then the second time that the air is going to echo again, that is going to be So 100 hertz, the applied, the first time it's gonna be 50. I'm sorry, it's gonna be 200 hertz. So that the second time you're gonna have one whole wave fitting in. The entire wave will fit in. And there will be a node here, and then the pressure points will be inside, and there will be another node in the middle, and then another point of pressure. A whole wave will fit in. So again, just like the guitar string, 100, the second frequency is going to produce smaller waves but faster. That will be 200, and then the third time is going to be 300, 400, and so on. So this one, the first time the wave goes in, the first response is going to be 200 hertz. The second, it will be 3, and so on. So this is how it goes. It has, but the important thing is that half of the wave is going to fit, and the first time that the air is going to respond. So that is called a half-wave resonator. And it has a node. Let me bring you to, so this is a node here. This will be look like that. So this is the half of the wave at first will fit in. That is the compression. Don't worry about this one. This is the reflected wave. So half will fit in, and one node will be at the opening of the tube on one side, and the other node will be on the other, and the other opened end. These will be the points of the least amount of pressure. And then the wave will be reflected, so it will be mimicking the origin, the other one. That is the, so this basically produces what is called a standing wave, where one compression is against another compression. One rarefaction against one compression. And we'll explain later how this is avoided, because it opposes, there's opposing pressures here. So the area of the wave that is the highest point of the compression, that is called node. So this is called node, and this is called antinode. So only one half of the wave will fit at the first time, but the air continues to vibrate, just like the swing. When you pull it, let go, it is going to give you many back and forth oscillations, and each one is going to be smaller and smaller and smaller gradually. In this one, the first one is the lowest frequency. That's going to mean only one half of this. It means the wave will be twice as the length of the tube. So one half is going to fit in at first, and then when the frequencies become smaller and smaller, less and less, then more of the wave will fit in. You have one whole wave, and then 1.5, and then 2 waves, and then 2.5, and they will increase as you keep going, basically in half waves all the time. So the resonant frequency of a tube depends on the length of the tube, the shape, configuration of the tube, its geometry, if it's square, cylinder, and so on, and whether the tube is closed on one end or closed on both ends. So now you notice that these are different than what we mentioned before about length, mass, and all of this. The other ones have to do with mechanical resonators, like just rubber band. Tension, length, and mass, or density. The nodes are the specific parts of the wave that receive minimal amplification within the tube. And then the antinodes are the total, basically the greatest points of the the greatest points of displacement. There's a video here that you can watch to help you understand the concepts better. So now, what happens when we have a tube that's closed on one end, like a jar, or say a can that is opened on one end, and one end is closed? What happens there? So that tube acts as a filter then. It is not going to give you every resonance that you apply. Not every resonance is going to be reflected, is going to be amplified in that. So that first, when you apply, say 100 hertz tone, or maybe 1,000 hertz tone, whatever it is, you apply it at first. That tube is going to give you, is going to take in only 1/4 of that first wave will fit at the first time. 1/4 of the wave. So if you want to know, for example, the length of the wave, how long is the wavelength of the wave that you put in, you are going to measure the length of the tube. So you measure the length of the tube and say, oh, if 1/4 fits into the tube, that means, and the length of the tube is 4 inches, that means 1/4 is 4 inches, and 1/4 plus 1/4 is 1/2, that is 8 inches, and then the other half is, so you say 4 times 4 is 16 inches. You can figure it out, because if you are given the length of the tube, you'll be able to figure out the length of the entire wave. The first wave, remember, the first wave that you make has the longest wavelength. And then the harmonics that come after, the first harmonic will be double the frequency. So in here, the second time this thing should be expected to vibrate, should be 1/2, but I'll explain how this tube now that is closed on one end will behave in a unique way, in a different way. So there is, the open end is going to have a node, and the closed end is going to have an antinode. The maximum point of pressure is going to be inside of the tube. And what you see here, the lower line, is the reflected wave. So that reflected wave, as it goes out, is going to make a node with the original wave here. But no, the important thing is to know here that only 1/4 of the wave, the first time that the air will vibrate inside of the container, the first vibration or first harmonic has the lowest frequency, and it has the greatest wavelength. That means from there, the wave is going to decrease, and more of the wave will fit in. At some point, several waves will fit in, and so on, as the air keeps, echoing the original tone. So the wavelength of the lowest resonant frequency, always, as you could see on the harmonic series, the lowest resonant frequency on the left is always has the greatest amplitude. And everything, all the frequencies that come, they decrease systematically as you move from left to right. They move, you go harmonics, the frequencies become greater and greater and greater, and by nature, the higher the frequency, the less the energy and the less the amplitude or loudness of that frequency. So remember that I make a sound here, and as it goes away, it keeps going away from me. It loses energy gradually in a systematic way based every foot it travels. It will lose some of it, will be damped, will lose some of its strength until it goes to the wave front at the edges of the wave, and it cannot be heard anymore. So again, please, if one concept doesn't make sense, it is because it will depend on previous concepts. If you review and understand what we said before in the first two classes and the first three videos, you will definitely, it will make sense to you as I'm speaking here, because concepts build on top of each other. So in a closed tube resonator, the first resonance that occurs has the greatest amplitude, it has the lowest frequency, and that means it has the longest wavelength. So that means only 1/4 of the first vibration, only 1/4 will fit into that tube and at the first time. The second time it vibrates, more of the wave will fit in. So the initial vibration will determine the length of the wave. If I say to you, there's a tube here that is 4 inches long, and you put a tone into it, what is the first harmonic? Or what is the wavelength that I'm putting into it? So you go and say, oh, if this is 4 inches, and I know that 1/4 of the wave fits in at first, so I just say 1/4 times 4, that gives me the length of the entire wave. That means 4 times 16, 4 times 4/4, that means 16 centimeters or 16 inches. By the way, the length of the human vocal tract, based on, say, the average males and females, adult male, adult female combined together, is about 16 centimeters from the right above the vocal folds to the lips. See, about 16 centimeters. So in another aspect of a quarter wave resonator, of the tube that is closed on one end, is that it is selective. It doesn't amplify every time that you expect the frequency. For example, if you go here, look at the open-ended, tube with both ends open. So you apply the 100 hertz first. The first time, half of the wave will fit in. Second time, a whole wave will fit in. Third time, 3/4 of the wave will fit in, and so on. So the 100 hertz, the first time the air responds, is going to give you a wave that is 200 hertz by nature, just like the harmonics law that we explained in the harmonics series. 100, the fundamental frequency is 100. It's going to give you, the first time the air will vibrate, it will give you 200, and it keeps going from there. So then the second vibration is going to give you, if this is 200, the second will be 300, and then 400, 500, 600, similar to the way a guitar string behaves. But the quarter wave resonator is going to accept first, it will increase in quarters. So the first vibration is going to, only 1/4 will fit in. Second, 1/2. Third, 3/4. Fourth, one whole wave. And you keep increasing and increasing in segments of like quarters. But in numbers, in the frequency, if you get the harmonic series and you say the 100 hertz that you put in there, 100 is the original frequency that you apply. And then you start to, you vibrate, you apply the tone, and then you get here a response, a given response based on what the tube, if the 100, how close it is to the vibration of the tube. Let's say that the tube is identically 100. So 100, and the way that this is going to respond, by nature, it has 100 hertz. So when you hit that, the first time you're gonna, let's say, have 1/4, and then the 2/4, and then 3 and 4 and 5 and so on. The first time, when there's 1/4, there's a response. The second time that you are expected to get a response, the tube doesn't react. It decreases the sound. It doesn't respond to amplify the sound. And then the third time, it's going to give you amplification. So the fourth time, it will not respond. So selectively, that tube is going to only reply to the tone when the tone comes close to its own. So the first vibration, it's going to just immediately act. So that will be number one. And then second vibration that's supposed to act, it's gonna attenuate it. And then the third one is going to be amplified. So it will skip the even numbers, and the even frequencies, and it will reply to the odd frequencies. This could be complicated, but I'm going to try to make it as simplified as possible so that it makes sense to you. So let's say here we have there's a fundamental frequency applied. Now, because we understand that any tube is going to respond based on how close the applied frequency is to its own natural resonant frequency. If it is not close, it's not going to respond. And it could be close, but not the same. So how does it respond? So you might put, let's say, for example, that the tube has a frequency of 500 hertz. And then you apply a 100 tone to it. And the tube is not going to care. And then that 100 tone is going to continue to be echoed in the air, and then it goes 200, there's no response, 300, no response, 400, no response, 500, and immediately then you get a response, because 500 now came when the frequency came close to the resonance, natural resonance of the tube, then the tube is, starts to respond, and it gives you that tone here. So that means we take the first harmonic, the first vibration, and we consider it as the mother of what comes next. And we do not care now about the fundamental frequency, because it's a whole different manner now. The first time the tube responds will determine whatever comes after. So in that case, the first harmonic, we say the first vibration is here. And then the second time the tube is expected to respond, the second time, that's supposed to be 300, the tube is not going to amplify it. It will ignore it. And then the third time it's expected to vibrate, it will pick up that and it will amplify it. The fourth time is going to be attenuated, or it's not going to be responded to, but so this is 1, 2, and then 3, 4, and then 5 is going to be amplified. So what we have done here is that the tube closed on one end, it kind of weeds out the even frequencies, because these frequencies produce opposing forces that will make the wave not optimal, that will make the tone not pure tone, not optimal. So, and then it amplifies the odd number 1, the first frequency 1, resonant frequency. The second one is not, it is silenced. The third one is amplified. The fourth is not. The fifth is amplified. So what we do now, we call the first one R1, resonant frequency number 1, and then R2, R3, R4, R5. But then we know that the even ones are deleted or attenuated, not significant. So we care about what is there, what the tube actually gives us back. So we take these and say, okay, we call these formants. We call the first one, R1 is called F1, the first formant. And then the second time the tube response is actually the third vibration, we call it the second formant. And they go to the fifth one and say, oh, this is the third formant. So formant is the actual response that the tube gives you. So the first time it gives you a response, first formant, and then in the second, and then we ignore the deleted ones. But for our purposes of counting, identifying these formats, knowing where they are, we need to understand we number the columns. With the first response, well, F1, we call it R1, resonance 1, and then resonance 2, resonance 3, 4, 5. So you'll find that R1 equals is F1. R3 is F2, the second formant. R5, resonant frequency number 5 in the series, is F3, the formant number 3, the actual response. Okay, so then the concept of standing waves. A standing wave is created within a quarter wave, within a quarter wave resonator. So, for example, the second time, I should have put a different image here, but this one. So now there's the initial quarter wave here, 1/4 of the wave fitting in, and then the wave is echoed back. You know, the wave hits the closed end and then is immediately echoed back, is immediately reflected back. So you have an identical mirror image of the wave that is coming in. And then you have now the compression of this wave is lined up against the rarefaction of this wave. So that gives us a standing wave. The same can happen in a closed end, in an open end. So the standing wave is where you have perfect alignment of the compression of one wave, and the reflected wave is going to give you, it will go in the opposite direction, whereby this will have the compression, this will have the rarefaction, and they're opposing each other. So the wave, it becomes still. It is as if there's nothing happening. So the incident wave gets reflected again against the closed end of the tube, and the reflected wave is identical to the incident wave, but and both waves are mirror images of each other. So that means there are opposing forces in that regard. So what you need to keep in mind is that in any filter, any quarter wave resonator, because it selectively takes out the even numbers of the frequencies, that is going to make it a filter. A filter is like having, if you have like a piece of cloth and you make some lemon juice or squeeze some lemons, and you get a piece of cloth and you pour the juice on the cloth, and then under only the water will come down, but all the pulp is going to stay on top. So you use that as a filter. So a quarter wave resonator is going to filter out the parts of the wave that could negatively affect the wave, and it will, in the meantime, amplify the resonant frequencies that will enhance the wave and make it louder. So this is what happens in a quarter wave resonance. At first, 1/4 of the wave will fit in. Second time, you're going to have, instead of having 1/2, that is attenuated, that is ignored. Then the third time, you're going to have 3/4. Here's 1/4, and there's another quarter, and there's 1/4. So you have 3/4 of the wave fitting in. That's when the wave, when the tube actually gives you a response. So these are the actual responses, and then you leave out the ignored ones. So there is one in between these two that is ignored. And then when the one more quarter fits in, the wave becomes one whole, 4/4 that is ignored. And then 1/4 is added. As it fits in, the wave becomes smaller and smaller every time it keeps playing. Then you have 5/4. So in effect, let's go back here. This is the first resonant R1, and this is F1, first format. And then this is R3, and this is F, second format. This is R5, and it is the third format. This is R5, and then what's supposed to be R6 is deleted, and then R7, that gives you the fourth. So this is how systematically increases in quarters, but every even frequency is deleted, is attenuated, and then only the odd ones are left. So this is what the wave becomes. And as you keep going, more and more will fit inside of that tube. And that's exactly how our vocal tract resonates, because it is a tube and it is closed at one end, because the vocal folds, as you vibrate, when you come to vibrate them, they come together to close the airway. And as the air squeezes itself between the vocal folds, it exits in one direction into the closed tube, and that into the vocal tract. And that exactly, the vocal tract behaves exactly in this manner to make it a filter and to make it a closed tube resonator. So let's now come to speak about bandwidth. Bandwidth is the range of frequencies that a resonator responds to. When we say range, you have to have two numbers, the lowest number and the highest number. And what the distance in between is the range. So the bandwidth, the width of the band of amplification, like say, for example, there is a tube here, and I know when I put a tune into it, if the tube is going to continue, the air will resonate when the tone that is played will come to match its resonant frequency. And then from there, it keeps playing and playing until it dies down. So the first time it responds to the time it dies down. So symmetrical tubes, like a cylinder, transmit only a limited range of frequencies. They only accept they're very specific. Like I would do these experiments when, I'm in my office and I have my tools. If you get a tube, for example, let's say you make a microphone like this, or you make a tube like this, and say, ooh. You notice as you change your frequency, make it higher or lower, the tube is going to, either enhance its response or decrease its response. What matters is how close your vocal frequency comes to the resonant frequency of the tube. But when it responds then it will start from there. The harmonics will begin from there. So symmetrical tubes like cylinders are selective. Like as I go ooh, it's not going to respond to amplify many frequencies that can be played. Only the ones that are closest to it. So let's say, for example, that it's 100 hertz, and let's say my voice, I'm gonna play my voice into it, and my voice is 100, so it will give me a good response. And then someone whose voice is 90 hertz, that's very, very low. Let's say 95, the tube may give that person a response. 90, the tube will give a response. But below this, no, it's not going to react. But then this is from the lower end. So 100 hertz, if you go below 100, it will give you up to 10 hertz, 10 decibels below, 10 hertz lower. But then on the other side, 105, it will respond. 110, it will respond. But beyond 110, it's not going to respond. So now I have a range. 90 is the lowest frequency that this tube will respond to. After that, it doesn't care. And then 110 is the upper limit, the highest frequency this tube is going to amplify. So the range is 90 to 110. That is my range. So the bandwidth, to calculate it, I'm going to say it goes from 90 to 110. So 110 minus 90 hertz, it gives me 20 hertz. So in one word, the bandwidth is the highest frequency minus the lowest frequency that the tube will respond to. So the tube is going to, if it has, I take that bandwidth and split it into 10 on each side. If you have 10 below, it will accept. 10 above, it will accept. So this is how it works. So symmetrical tubes are very selective. They have a shorter bandwidth. They do not just amplify any sound that comes to them. And irregularly shaped tubes, resonators or tubes, are going to accept a wider range. They have a greater bandwidth. And this is what we say broad band. It is the band that is the thing that is going to accept a variety of sounds that are going to, you will be watching the game as if you are in the game. Every little detail just comes in and you hear it as you watch. So the vocal tract is a vertical tube, and the tube itself is connected to the oral cavity, another tube, and connected to the nasal cavity, another tube. So 3 tubes connected with each other, and they all have irregular shapes. And the tissue and all kinds of different configurations of the vocal tract make it very irregular. And moreover, the vocal tract keeps changing its configuration as you speak, and that makes it even more irregular. That makes it a broadly tuned resonator that's going to give you a lot of response to many amplifications. Amplifications to many frequencies that you can put into it, and that definitely will make our voice dynamic. And the vocal tract gives us up to 40 formants or 40 resonances that it gives in response to the one tone that you put by the vocal folds. And these 40 resonances play and combine together to give us finally the tone that you hear at our lips. So as if instead of one person talking, you make them into 40 people talking. And they combine their voices together. So how do we determine the bandwidth? This is a very important concept, and you need to really understand how to calculate, and you need to know the concepts one by one. So let's say there is a tube here. And the tube, the way, the nature of the tube, the design of it is gonna make it vibrate when it vibrates at a frequency that's 500 hertz. So that's the resonance frequency of the tube is 500 as you measure it by some kind of measuring instrument. So then you take the frequency and put it in the center here, and you call this R. You call this the central frequency, CF, central frequency, and you could call it the fundamental, because when the frequency matches, whatever frequency you apply here matches that tube at 500, the tube will vibrate at 500 at first. So that is the center frequency, that red line. And then we want to determine kind of look at the bandwidth. We want to determine what this tube is going to amplify, what it will attenuate. So on either limit, like the example I gave you, 100, and if you come say 90, it will give you a response. Below 90, no. And then on the other side, if you go 10 frequency, 10 hertz above, it will amplify, because it is symmetrical in both ways because of the shape of the wave. So that is the center, 500 hertz. Then let's say the bandwidth of that wave is 400. The bandwidth of that tube is 400 hertz. So it will respond, its resonant frequency is 500, but its bandwidth is 400. That means the center frequency of the tube is 500, and ideally your best bet to make it respond optimally, give you the highest amplitude, is if the vibration that is applied to it is 500 hertz. So that is the center frequency. But if the bandwidth is 400, it means it is going to, we need to plot the bandwidth. So on left of the red line is the same as what happens on the right side of it. What matters is the distance. How close is the frequency to the center frequency? And that can happen, it has to happen in two ways. So on the lower end, we need to take that 400 and split it. Put 200 on the lower end, and then 200 on the upper end. So left is lower frequencies, right is higher frequencies, because that is frequency goes this way. Amplitude goes this way. So that means if you write here 500, and then you need to go down 200 lower. So 500, and then 400, and then 300. So this green line will be 300 hertz, because you take the band, the width of the band is from here to the upper end, but we split along the center here. So you put 200 on the lower frequency end and 200 on the upper frequency end. So then that means here's the 300 hertz, and then here you go to 200 more on the other side. So 500, the red line, and then 600, 700. So now the range here now, the bandwidth is the distance from 300 to 700. So if you go 700 minus 300, it gives you the 400. Okay, but always whatever bandwidth you are given, you have to split it along the middle, along the center frequency. So that means the first response when a tone comes into this tube. If it is 500, it will give you full, it will amplify it, gives you full amplification at the highest level. Then if you go 500 below, 500, 200 hertz below, it will decrease in loudness gradually. It will become, as you go, say, for example, 400, it will respond, but it will give you lower. It will not be as loud. It will give you a lower amplitude. And if you go then, so 5, 4, 350, yeah, it gives you a response, but it is less loud. And then 300, it responds, but the response is 3 decibels, 3 full decibels lower. And then below 300, like say 250, then it doesn't become significant anymore. It just starts to attenuate sharply. It decreases the volume sharply, and that is attenuation. So basically, below 300, the tube doesn't respond. It doesn't amplify anything, any tones that are below 300. So if I come and put a tone into it that is 500, yes, it gives me full response. If I give, change my pitch to make the sound here 300, it still gives me a response. If I make the sound that I put in 250, no, it will ignore. So that is 200, the distance between the center frequency and the time that the frequency when the tube does not amplify. Now on the right side, the same thing happens, because the frequency, the distance between center frequency and 700 is exactly the same. It is 200 hertz. So if I go 550, it will give me a response, but it's going to decrease in loudness slightly. 600, it will respond, but it will decrease. Every time it gives me a response, it decreases as you go. When you reach 700, that the distance is 200 on the other side. That means that is the only response you get. But after that, you are going to start to attenuate rapidly, and you do not, the tube doesn't respond. So the tube is going to respond to a sound best and amplify it once the sound falls within its bandwidth. If the sound is any sound that comes in between 300 and 700, it will be amplified. Any sound that comes higher than 700, it will be attenuated. Any sound that comes below 300 will be attenuated. So we call this the 3 dB point, or we call it on this lower end, the lower cutoff frequency, the frequency after which the tube doesn't respond anymore. And then on the other side, there's a corresponding point equally on the other side that is called the upper cutoff, because in terms of the frequencies become 200 hertz higher. So if the frequencies are 200 lower or 200 higher, then they will not be amplified. So with anything that falls, any sound that falls within this range between 3 and 7 will be amplified. Any sound that falls out will be attenuated. I feel I'm repeating a lot, but that is for your benefit, because these concepts need to really sink in. So you need to study them often. You need to study them several times a day. These are not easy concepts. So you'll have a question, a number of questions in the exam where you will be given similar to this. You'll be given a tube and says, oh, this tube is 200 hertz and it has a bandwidth of 500 hertz, or it has a bandwidth of 400 hertz. And you need to determine what frequencies will be amplified. You need to determine the lower cutoff. You need to determine the upper cutoff. You need to determine the center frequency. So the frequencies that can be amplified on both ends. So if I say to you, this is 500, anything 500 minus 1, like, or 449 hertz, that is going to be here. 450. For any frequency that goes between 300, 500 will be amplified. Any frequency that goes between 500 and 7 will be amplified. And any that come on either end will be attenuated. So if I go and say, does this tube amplify a 200 hertz tone? Immediately no, because it falls on the opposite, on the lower end, below 300 and so on. So in that case, what frequencies will be attenuated? So you go anything below 300, anything above 700. Okay, so what is the difference between narrowly tuned resonators and broadly tuned resonators? Narrowly tuned resonators are going to have a shorter bandwidth, a smaller bandwidth, like say maybe 50, for example. So instead of this is gonna, like say 500 hertz is the center frequency. If that tube were to have 50 hertz bandwidth, that means bandwidth, let me split it along the middle, put 25 hertz here, 25 hertz here. That means 500, and on the lower end I'm gonna have 475 hertz, and on the upper end it will be 500. It will be 25 hertz more, 525 hertz. So between this range, anything will be amplified. Below that, nothing. So that will makes the range very limited. That means that tube is not going to respond to every sound. It's very selective. It doesn't give you much of a choice. These tubes are lightly damped by nature. Lightly damped. What does that mean? When you put a tone into a tube like this, it will wait and wait. It will first the response is going to be slow, because you make the tone and the air continues to echo to go into harmonics. And then when that harmonic finally comes close to the tube's configuration, or RF, then the tube is going to start to give you a response. So it takes a long time to respond. Wait, you say it, and then wait until we come close to my resonant frequency, and then wait, it responds. But then when the tone has stopped now, but the tube is still playing it. So it is lightly damped. In other words, how does this translate? In countries where you have old telephone lines and old technology there, and you make a phone call, so you say hello, and then immediately there's a sound, you wait, there's no response, and then the other person replies to you, and then you hear your own echo after that, your own voice coming back again. So we say delayed feedback. So and that makes it so hard. So that is because they were using narrowly tuned resonators, are still using them. But now the broadly tuned it gives you an immediate response. You say something, it takes your voice, amplifies it, and immediately when you stop, it stops. So the same like when I say broadband, it means you are watching a game, you see someone raising his hand and shouting, you hear the shouting at once. But in the past, you see someone like black and white TV, the person says hello, and you see them saying hello, but then later the sound comes in. So the effect of the narrowly tuned technology in the past, what you see doesn't match what you hear. So now the broadly tuned, it captures everything at the moment exactly. The sound comes in immediately, it responds quickly, and once the tone plays, it stops. It is heavily damped. So examples of narrowly tuned are cylinders, symmetrical tubes, machines that are or machines that are designed to test particular frequencies for specific vowel sounds or consonant sounds in language. We need that to be very, very precise. But examples of broadly tuned include earphones. The eardrum itself is a broadly tuned resonator. The vocal tract is a broadly tuned resonator. So these are examples because they accept more frequencies that they can amplify. So again, the bandwidth is the range between the lowest frequency that a resonator will amplify and the highest frequency that resonator will amplify. So the lowest frequency to be amplified is on the left side of the center frequency. We call this the lower cutoff. And the lower cutoff occurs when at that point the frequency is 3 decibels. That say the lowest cutoff here occurs when the point of if you pass it to the left, there is no amplification anymore. That is when the sound, that frequency here is 3 decibels. But below this, then there is no response. On the other side, when the sound also reaches 3 decibel, then on the other side, it just doesn't respond anymore. So the lower cutoff is the lower frequencies that can be amplified below the center frequency. The upper cutoff is the higher, the limit, the end of the higher frequencies that can be amplified, and the distance between the lower cutoff and the upper cutoff is your bandwidth. So that is called a resonance curve. This chart is called a resonance curve. And you need to know what information is displayed. What information does the resonance curve give you? Number one, the amplitude, all on the vertical axis, amplitude, the loudness. And then you see on the horizontal axis, you see the frequency. You see the frequencies, all of them, and you see the center frequency, you see the lower cutoff, you see the upper cutoff, you see what is attenuated, what is amplified. So then we look at the kinds of filters that are designed, of course, for different effects. There is a low pass filter, there is a high pass filter, band pass filter, and the band stop filter. So low pass filter is a filter that is designed to allow the amplification of low frequencies that go below the lower cutoff. So here you want to design, I'd like this filter not to attenuate what is below. Basically you remove the lower cutoff and you say, I'm going to allow all the frequencies to come below that are not supposed to be there. I'd like them to be there for whatever effect. So that is low pass. The other one says, I want to keep this them, but I want to allow the higher frequencies that come above, the 700 or above the upper cutoff. I want all of this to be amplified, not to be rejected. So that is designed by factories, and they produce these filters for particular effects. So that here, if it allows the higher frequencies, we call that the upper, high pass. It passes the frequencies that are above, that are higher than the upper cutoff. And then, so this is the high pass. And then there's a band pass. The band pass is basically wants to say, well, I just want to focus more on the frequencies that are in between the one that is in between. I want to amplify the a little bit of the lower and the upper, and I'm going to enhance that range. Anything that is in that range is going to be a band pass. So that is, you just basically take out of the wave the most important piece, and just have the resonant react to it, and ignore, cut off the other edges on both sides. You basically expand this area in the middle where there's a good response. And the vocal tract is like this. It amplifies optimally. And then the band stop, it says, okay, you know what? I want to take out the range, the bandwidth. I'm just gonna basically just delete that. And then I'm gonna have the tube respond to what it's not supposed to respond to, below the lower cutoff and above the upper cutoff. I'm gonna have that tube respond to this, but I will delete the most important part, so that will be attenuated, but on either end you allow the other frequencies. They do this sometimes for particular effects, like testing for audiology, where you make a particular tone and then